Aaliyah could barely sit still as she waited in her lawyer's office, her fingers tapping nervously on the edge of the polished desk while her mind raced in every direction at once. The city outside the window seemed oblivious to the storm brewing. Inside her head, the hum of traffic and distant voices a stark contrast to the shock that had landed like a weight in her chest just hours earlier. She had discovered that her parents, the people she had trusted completely, had quietly redirected her inheritance, a fortune she had assumed was hers to manage, and handed it, in large part, to her younger brother, a man who had shown little responsibility and even less gratitude. Every detail she uncovered made her heart sink further. Emails, legal documents, bank statements, showing a careful, deliberate plan to keep her in the dark, to manipulate her without her knowing. The betrayal cut deeper than she expected, not just because money was involved, but because it was her own family, the people who had always claimed they acted in her best interest. Her stomach twisted as she realized that her entire life had been affected by their choices, that they had carefully maintained appearances while controlling her future in silence. Her lawyer, Mr. Shah, leaned forward, his expression serious but measured, and Aaliyah noticed the calm confidence in his demeanor that she wished she could feel. "Aaliyah," he said, tapping a thick folder filled with documents, "we have to approach this carefully. You need to call your parents and tell them you've lost the $20 million. It's not about lying. It's about revealing their true intentions. How they respond will tell you everything you need to know." Aaliyah's eyes widened at the suggestion. The thought of deceiving her own parents felt strange, almost wrong. But beneath it simmered a spark of something she hadn't felt in years, a chance to see them, without the mask they had perfected over decades. She realized that the moment had arrived when she could expose the truth, not with anger, but with strategy. The idea of holding the upper hand, even temporarily, sent adrenaline rushing through her veins. When she left the office, the city felt sharper somehow, every sound amplified as she pulled out her phone. Her hands trembled slightly as she dialed the number she knew by heart, the one she had called countless times for comfort, advice, and guidance. But now the conversation would be different. Her mother answered, cheerful and unsuspecting, the tone of her voice ringing with warmth that only made the next words more difficult to say. "Amy Abu, I lost everything," she began, forcing her voice to remain steady even as her heart raced. On the other end, the pause was immediate and heavy, a quiet that spoke louder than any words could. Aaliyah imagined the wheels turning in their minds, trying to reconcile the casual tone of her voice with the gravity of her words. Her father's voice came next, careful, controlled. Yet there was a subtle shift she had expected, a hint of relief that made her stomach twist again. Her mother's concern was punctuated with something else, almost imperceptible, the kind of calculated worry someone shows when they care less about the person than about appearances. Every word, every hesitation, every moment of silence was recorded in Aaliyah's mind, stored and analyzed for the revelations she hoped to uncover. She continued the story carefully, sticking to the script Mr. Shah had prepared, emphasizing the loss, the magnitude of the financial blow, and the helplessness she felt. When the conversation ended and she hung up, Aaliyah felt a strange mixture of emotions: fear, anticipation, and an unfamiliar sense of empowerment. The truth she had suspected about her parents' priorities and loyalties now seemed closer to confirmation. But the real lesson wasn't in their reactions alone. It was in her ability to see clearly, to act with patience and precision, to control the narrative in a situation where she had once felt powerless. The first step of her plan was complete, and though the outcome was uncertain, she could feel the tension of possibility building, the sense that the next few days would reveal everything she needed to know. The betrayal was real, but so was the opportunity, and Aaliyah was ready to face whatever came next, knowing that the game had changed and that she had finally taken the first move. After that phone call, Aaliyah felt a strange mix of adrenaline and caution. her mind racing with possibilities as she observed her parents' reactions. She noticed the subtle changes immediately. Her mother's voice, once warm and effortless, now carried a faint edge of calculation when she mentioned her brother. And her father seemed hesitant in every financial conversation, measuring his words as if unsure of what she really knew. Aaliyah didn't panic. Instead, she treated it like a puzzle, collecting every detail, every nuance, every pause in their speech, as if each moment were a clue pointing to the truth. She started documenting everything, writing down conversations, noting reactions, replaying words in her mind to catch even the smallest inconsistencies. She realized that the betrayal went deeper than she thought. Not just the money, but the subtle manipulation that had been ongoing for years. The realization made her chest tighten, but it also sparked determination. This wasn't just about reclaiming wealth. It was about proving to herself that she could navigate this treachery with control and precision. The next days were a blur of observation and quiet strategy. She watched her parents from a careful distance, paying attention to every detail, the way her mother mentioned the brothers' purchases with mild pride, the casualness with which her father spoke about investments, the fleeting glance when Aaliyah mentioned anything related to her own supposed losses. These details revealed more than any confession could, painting a picture of priorities, loyalties, and self-interest. Her anger simmered beneath the surface, but she tempered it with a cold, calculated patience. She knew acting impulsively would only validate their manipulation and give them control. Instead, she focused on gathering information, analyzing documents, and discussing next steps with her lawyer. Every email, bank record, and conversation became a piece of the map she was slowly piecing together, leading to the inevitable moment when she would have all the answers. Aaliyah also wrestled internally with the moral side of her plan. The idea of revenge, of exposing her parents' true nature, was tempting and even satisfying to imagine. But she questioned whether it was worth the potential permanent rift in the family. She didn't want to destroy them entirely, nor did she want to let her brother remain ignorant of the consequences of his actions. Instead, she considered the balance. She could reclaim what was rightfully hers, assert control, and make them recognize the betrayal without creating lasting destruction. The tension in her chest grew daily as she balanced this moral tightrope. Every decision felt like a test of her patience, intelligence, and emotional strength. She realized that true power wasn't just in revenge, but in restraint, in knowing when to act and when to observe. Her interactions with her parents became exercises in careful performance. Every smile, every casual response was deliberate, masking the storm of knowledge she carried beneath the surface. She kept her voice light, her tone measured, and her body language relaxed, while internally she cataloged every slip, every hesitation, every fleeting expression of discomfort or surprise. Her parents, unaware of the trap, gradually revealed themselves, showing their true priorities in unguarded moments. Aaliyah felt a surge of both vindication and sorrow-vindication that she was seeing them clearly for the first time. Sorrow for the realization that the people she loved most had prioritized selfishness over honesty and trust. As the days turned into a week, Aaliyah began shaping the next phase of her plan. She coordinated with her lawyer, strategizing the presentation of evidence and timing for when the confrontation would have maximum impact. Every document she highlighted, every record she compiled was another layer of preparation, giving her confidence that when the moment came, she would not just reveal the truth, she would command it. The stakes were higher than ever, but so was her clarity. She had transformed from someone who had been blindsided into someone who controlled the narrative, who knew the value of patience and observation. The anticipation of revealing the betrayal grew with each passing day, not fueled by anger alone, but by the desire for justice and recognition of the truth in quiet moments. Aaliyah allowed herself to imagine the confrontation, the mix of shock, guilt, and realization that would cross her parents. faces when they finally understood that their manipulations had been uncovered. Yet she tempered the vision with restraint, reminding herself that true satisfaction would come not from cruelty, but from reclaiming control, asserting her worth, and demonstrating that she had grown stronger because of, not despite, their betrayal. The tension of planning, observing, and waiting became almost addictive, each day sharpening her focus, strengthening her resolve, and preparing her for the decisive moment when she would finally reclaim her agency and confront the family that had underestimated her asterisk. The day of the confrontation arrived with a quiet intensity that made Aaliyah's stomach twist. But she welcomed the rush of adrenaline was the moment she had been preparing for. The culmination of careful observation, research, and patience. Her parents had invited her over under the guise of a casual dinner, and she accepted calmly, hiding the storm of knowledge and strategy she carried inside. Every step toward their house was deliberate, measured, her mind running through the plan one last time, considering every possible reaction, every excuse, every subtle deflection they might use. When she arrived, her parents greeted her warmly, oblivious to the fact that their carefully constructed facade was about to crumble. Their smiles were practiced, their voices light. But Aaliyah noticed the tiny tremor in her father's hand when he poured tea, the hesitation in her mother's tone when she mentioned her brother's recent business ventures. These micro-expressions confirmed what she already suspected. The truth had weight, and it would hit them harder than they expected. As they sat down to eat, Aaliyah kept her composure, letting the conversation flow naturally while quietly steering it toward financial matters, toward the very investments and decisions that had been manipulated in her absence. Her parents spoke casually, confident that the story of her loss was the truth, unaware that she had already gathered every detail of their deception. Then, with a calmness that surprised even herself, Aaliyah began presenting evidence. Bank statements, emails, legal documents carefully compiled, clearly organized were placed on the table before them. Her voice was steady, controlled, each word measured as she explained what she had uncovered, revealing the full extent of their manipulation and favoritism toward her brother. The room fell silent, the casual warmth replaced by tension so thick it was almost suffocating. Parents' expressions shifted rapidly: shock, guilt, disbelief, and the faintest flicker of panic, all flashing across their faces as they realized that the carefully hidden truth could no longer be ignored. Aaliyah watched them closely, noting every reaction, every twitch, every faltering word. She felt the familiar surge of satisfaction that comes from holding the upper hand, but it was tempered by a deeper, more profound clarity. This wasn't just about proving them wrong or humiliating them. It was about reclaiming her life, asserting control, and demonstrating that she had grown stronger through adversity. Her parents tried to speak, their voices cracking slightly as they attempted to explain, justify, or minimize, but Aaliyah didn't interrupt. She let them flounder in the tension, let the truth speak for itself, because words alone could no longer hide years of deliberate manipulation. Each piece of evidence she laid out reinforced her position, showing that she wasn't acting out of spite, but from careful observation, preparation, and the desire for fairness. As the confrontation continued, Aaliyah felt the weight of choice pressing against her mind. She could escalate, make them feel the full force of guilt and humiliation, assert dominance in a way that would leave no doubt about who held the power. Or she could exercise restraint, assert her control quietly, reclaim what was rightfully hers, and walk away with dignity intact. She realized that the second path held more power than the first, the ability to command respect, enforce boundaries, and demonstrate her strength without resorting to cruelty. It was a test of her moral compass, of her ability to navigate betrayal with intelligence rather than impulse. The tension in the room, thick with revelation and unspoken emotions, underscored the gravity of the choice before her. When her parents finally recognized the truth, their expressions softened with a tentative acceptance, They were forced to confront not only their actions, but the reality that their daughter was no longer someone who could be manipulated or controlled. Alia took a deep breath, letting the weight of the moment settle around her, feeling a mix of triumph, clarity, and calm resolve. She didn't need to lash out or seek revenge through humiliation. Exposure of the truth itself was enough. She had regained her agency, reclaimed her inheritance, and proved that patience, strategy, moral clarity could achieve more than anger or impulsive retaliation ever could. By the end of the evening, the confrontation had reached its natural resolution. Her parents were silent, thoughtful, humbled in ways they hadn't expected. And Alia left with the quiet satisfaction of knowing she had navigated betrayal with precision. She had faced the people who had underestimated her, revealed the truth, and made deliberate choices that reinforced her strength without destroying those she once loved. The climax was not in revenge itself, but in the mastery of control. In the realization that power came from restraint, foresight, and the courage to act on one's convictions without surrendering to impulsive emotion. In that moment, she understood. The deeper lesson: true satisfaction and justice are measured not by how much pain one can inflict, but by the strength, dignity, and integrity one can maintain in the face of betrayal. Asterisk. After the confrontation, Alia walked away from her parents' house with a strange sense of calm. The tension of the previous days slowly giving way to clarity. She had expected anger, relief, maybe even tears, but instead there was a quiet understanding in the way they had looked at her. A recognition of the control she had reclaimed without resorting to humiliation or cruelty. The drive home was reflective. Every red light, every passing car seemed to echo the rhythm of her thoughts. The realization that the ordeal had changed her in ways far beyond money. She had confronted betrayal, exposed hidden truths, and navigated complex emotions with patience and strategy. That sense of power she felt wasn't derived from dominance or revenge, but from the knowledge that she had acted deliberately, morally, and with foresight. It was a quiet victory, the kind that left no room for bitterness, only strength. In the following days, her parents reached out tentatively, their messages carefully worded, their calls hesitant, revealing a mixture of regret and caution. Asked to meet, to explain, to apologize, and Alia responded with measured consideration. She had no interest in severing ties completely, but she was determined to maintain boundaries that had been ignored for years. Every interaction became an exercise in balance, showing grace while asserting her authority, acknowledging familial ties while reminding them that past betrayals would not be forgotten. She realized that the confrontation had shifted the family dynamic, forcing them to see her not as a naive daughter to manipulate, but as a woman capable of navigating deception and standing firm. Alia also focused on her brother, whose role in the manipulation had been less direct but equally impactful. She arranged a private conversation with him, calmly presenting the facts, the consequences of his actions, and the opportunities to make amends. Unlike the confrontation with her parents, this discussion was about accountability rather than revelation. She wanted him to understand that wealth and privilege came with responsibility, that ignoring ethics and honesty had consequences. The conversation was tense, but it was grounded in clarity rather than emotion. Alia felt a quiet satisfaction in knowing she had set boundaries and expectations, giving him a chance to reflect without being forced into shame with her family. Matters carefully managed, Alia turned her attention fully to herself. She reviewed her investments, her plans, and her goals, realizing that the ordeal had left her stronger, wiser, and more confident. The experience had sharpened her judgment, refined her understanding of people, and strengthened her emotional resilience. Each decision she had made, from calling her parents to observing their reactions, to revealing the evidence strategically, had reinforced her sense of agency. She now recognized that the true value of her actions wasn't measured in money or revenge, but in the clarity and control she had achieved over her own life. The lessons were profound. patience, careful observation, moral restraint. And the courage to act thoughtfully were more powerful than impulsive retaliation. Weeks later, life began to settle into a new rhythm. Alia's parents maintained contact, respectful and cautious, and her relationship with her brother remained carefully monitored. The financial control she had regained provided security, but more importantly, the emotional lessons endured. She felt empowered knowing that betrayal no longer held the ability to destabilize her, that she had the tools to confront deception, and that integrity and strategic thinking could navigate even the most personal challenges. The experience became a quiet source of confidence, a reminder that she could face any obstacle with intelligence and patience. Ultimately, Aaliyah understood that revenge, in its traditional sense, had been unnecessary. She had not sought to humiliate or punish. She had sought truth, fairness, and control over her own life. The satisfaction she felt came not from the discomfort of others, but from reclaiming her dignity, exposing the reality, and making deliberate choices about her future. She had turned betrayal into a lesson, manipulation into clarity, and loss into empowerment. Standing in her home one evening, reflecting on the past weeks, she smiled quietly. The ordeal had tested her, but she had emerged stronger, wiser, and more in command of her life than ever. She realized that the real victory lay not in revenge, but in reclaiming herself, asserting her boundaries, and living with integrity, knowing she had acted not only with justice, but with the calm certainty of someone who had mastered both strategy and emotion. Asterisk.